Hey guys, welcome back to the episode. Today's episode is about how to work out smarter, not longer, and get amazing results. I'm talking about KAATSU, KAATSU, which is a form of blood flow restriction. It actually is the original strategy for blood flow restriction that was developed in the 1960s by a doctor in Japan by the name of Dr. Sato. Dr. Sato is not an English-speaking person, so instead we have the next best thing. We have with us Steve Munatones, who brought KAATSU to us and to the world after traveling back and forth for 13 years to Japan, while Dr. Sato taught him everything he needed to know to share this with the rest of the world. And boy, are we lucky that he did. We also have with us John Doolittle, who works closely with Steve. These two guys are a wealth of knowledge, and they're just a pleasure to talk to. What's also a pleasure is working out with KAATSU. If you've been following me on social media, you know that I've been using this device extensively over the last month. I've been traveling with it because it is so portable. I just can't get over how versatile it is. I mean, how amazing is it that we can have a strategy at our fingertips that is applicable for anyone from an elite athlete to your grandmother and everybody in between. Like, it's pretty cool. So I'm going to let the podcast do the talking. If you want to learn more about KAATSU, you can go to kaatsu.com, KAATSU.com. So that's after the podcast. If you're looking for scientific research, papers, videos, they've got lots of stuff on the website. If you decide you're going to take the plunge and get yourself a KAATSU system, then you'll want to use discount code NAT10 and save 10% off your purchase. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, you can always reach me at natnidham.com. And if you're loving this episode and you get lots of value from it, make sure that you leave us a review, because that's how we rise up the rankings. So thank you so much for being here. I totally appreciate you guys. I hope to hear your comments. I hope that you enjoy this episode. I really loved recording it, and enjoy the show. Hey folks, just a little bit of housekeeping before we launch into the episode. Please remember that all of the information provided in these podcasts is for information purposes only. We are never offering treatments, cures, whatever, for any kind of disease or medical condition. Anything you hear about here is going to be intriguing. There's some research around it, but make sure that you check with your medical provider before you go off and do any of this stuff for yourself. All right. So, enjoy the episode. And also, if you're looking to connect with me for any reason, with your comments, questions, whatever it may be, you can reach me through my website, which is natnidham.com, or you can find me on Facebook in the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group, or on MeWe in the Biohacking Superhuman Performance group. And of course, you can also follow me on Instagram, which is at Natalie Nidham. Natalie is with an H between the T and the A, the second A. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you guys. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the podcast. Steve Munatones. Did I pronounce that right?
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Munatones and John Doolittle.
Perfect, Natalie.
Thank you both so much for being here today.
Our pleasure.
So we have two guests. So Steve, why don't you, Stephen or Steve? Probably
Stephen is fine.
Stephen is fine. Okay, so Stephen, why don't you maybe introduce yourself quickly so that people who are listening to the podcast recognize your voice, and then we'll have John say something, and then people can calibrate to his voice, and then we can go from there.
Got it. I'm Steve Munatones. I'm from Southern California, where I was born and raised. And I spent many years in Japan, where I first learned of KAATSU. And that is, I work with John every single day.
Yes, we do. And I'm John Doolittle. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I grew up in Northern California. I spent 25 years in the SEAL teams, and my last two surgery rehabs were with KAATSU. And that's when I first met Stephen.
Amazing. All right. So thank you so much for that. So let's start maybe with Stephen, because you're the guy that found Katsu far in a land far away and brought it back, right?
Yes, yes. I was an engineer working with Hitachi in Japan, and my old high school coach happened to be leading the US Olympic and national swim team. The world championships were in Japan. And he calls me up after 25 years and he says, "Hey, you're the only former swimmer I know who speaks, reads, and writes Japanese. Please come and help me. I'll sign you up as an assistant coach. Please help me." And so I did. That is where I first learned about Katsu, and that's where I first met Dr. Sato. And so that was in 2001. First time I met Dr. Sato, I was blown away with what he showed me with Katsu, just totally blown away. And because we were conversing in Japanese, I asked him, I said, "Dr. Sato, why isn't Katsu known around the world?" He said, "Oh, there's two reasons. One, I don't speak English. And two, I don't travel outside of Japan." And I said, "Okay, I do both of those. So can you teach me?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Do you have any materials?" And he says, he points up to his head as
Perfect.
in, "Everything is up here." I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to return back to Tokyo, and I'd be honored if you could teach me." He said, "Sure. I've been waiting to share this with the outside world." And so I returned back to Tokyo, and I did that at least 4 times a year for 13 years.
You're kidding.
For 13 years.
Wow.
And at the end of that 13-year period, again, I had no idea when it was going to stop.
Yeah.
None.
The download.
Yes. And I was learning every time I'd go to Japan, I'd spend, anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks there. And he taught me everything. We went to hospitals. We went to sumo wrestler dojos, they call them. We've met everybody. Comatose people with MS, people with cerebral palsy, you name it. And he was teaching me step by step how to apply Katsu to the wide spectrum of humanity. And after 13 years, he says one day, "Are you ready? Let's introduce it to the world." And that was 2014.
Wow, that's amazing. So what is it that first caught your attention with Katsu? Because what's the first, you went over as an assistant coach, a swim coach. And I know I've seen on your website a number of places like swimmers with the armbands on, and I'm sure the legs too, because kicking's so important. But how did it first grab your attention?
Oh, so I visited Dr. Sato at his office, and there was a line of people, older people that were waiting outside, and he would bring them in one by one, and he would do Katsu with them. And these people at the time were probably anywhere from 10 to 30 years older than me. And they'd come in, some limping, some bent over, and they would all walk out better. Better meaning they were standing up straighter, they were more fluid in their gait. They had a smile on their face, which Dr. Sato later taught me was the Katsu smile. The fundamental thing you want to do with Katsu is at the end of the session, you want to see someone smile. He says, if you have achieved that, you know Katsu. And that's what struck me. All these just regular people from all walks of life going to see this doctor in a suburb of Tokyo. John has been there. John has been there with his family. You walk in and he speaks quietly, very authoritatively, very with deep compassion. He listens to you. The patient or the client or the coach or the physician tells him whatever their ailment is or condition, and he listens. He asks a few questions, then he puts the bands on you, and then he takes you through the protocol, and then everybody left with that Katsu smile. And that's when, and I was watching this, and so when he put them on me, I found this profound change in my own body. I ended up with a smile, and that's when I said, "Oh, Dr. Sato, I really want to know more about this, and I'd like to learn." And that's when he said, "Well, I've been waiting for someone like you. I don't speak Japanese, and I don't travel outside of Japan." And that's chapter 1.
That's chapter 1. All right. John, when did you come into the picture?
Well, let's see, it's 2022. So it was about 6 or 7 years ago. I was going through one of my 12 orthopedic surgeries while I was in the SEAL teams. And the PT at the time, Jim Godin, said, "Hey, you gotta try this KAATSU stuff. You go really, really light, very low resistance." And then he showed me a picture of this guy. This is Dr. Sato, getting ready to turn 74 years
Holy
old.
jumping.
Yeah.
And there's no juice going on there, right?
No, totally natural. But here's the thing, he doesn't lift weights, or what he moves and lifts is super light resistance and very, very light weight, if any weight. And so when Jim showed me the picture of him, he's like, yeah, not only can you do rehab with KAATSU, but you can look like that. Yeah, but you can get like that while you're doing rehab without moving heavy weights. And I think the reason the PTs really like this stuff is I felt like I was working really hard when I was doing my rehab, but the reality was I was putting almost no stress or strain on my skeletal system, or definitely where the injury was. So I fell in love with it right out of the gate. And the PTs like it because you can create all this metabolic stress, but not have the inflammation response of pushing heavy weight. So I was introduced to it during rehab. It was a shoulder injury. And the first thing I asked was, because it was a rotator cuff repair.
Yeah.
And the bands, it made sense to me that things distal of the bands would, downrange or would be affected. But how would it affect something that's on the other side of the band? And that's when I started getting really interested in it. The fact that there's a systemic response.
Yeah.
You can have the leg bands on, but you feel it in your back. If you're doing any kind of multi-joint movement upstairs and you have the leg bands on, you still feel it. And now that I've been with the company a while and I've started reading, and I say started because there's literally hundreds of published research papers on this stuff, but it is a systemic response, and you can improve that blood flow everywhere just by having these bands on. It's really, really cool. But that's how I got introduced to it, was orthopedic rehab, and I was getting close to retiring out of the Navy, and we decided to do a family trip, and Stephen encouraged me to go visit Dr. Sato, and yeah, the rest is history.
That's amazing.
It was a great visit. And what's really crazy about that visit is while we were traveling, we were doing military space aid travel, so space availability travel on military tanker aircraft and cargo aircraft. Well, we were at one of the airports and Dover, Delaware, and my daughter, so she's 15 now, she was 10 at the time, she fell and broke her arm, broke the humerus.
Oh my God.
So when we met Dr. Sato, she was literally 2 to 3 days out of that break. She was in a full from your wrist all the way up to her armpit cast, nice pink fiberglass cast. But I got to watch Dr. Sato do KAATSU on her, and I had a loaner device from the command that I was assigned to. And Dr. Sato's like, hey, look, have her do these cycles. And he showed her how to do isometric holds. And without spending too much time on it, I'll just say 6 weeks later when we were at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii and she got the cast off, the doctors thought there was a mistake because the arm that the cast had been on, now, this is a 10-year-old girl, she's skinny anyway, but the arm that the cast had been on was totally defined. She didn't have range of motion, of course, because the arm had been bent for 6 weeks, but the arm was more defined and bigger than her arm that wasn't broken.
That is amazing, as
Because-
opposed to total atrophy, right? Which is what you would expect.
It was incredible. Not only was there no atrophy, but the arm was more defined than the other, and that really for me was, and for my wife, we were like, oh my God, this is awesome.
New career.
Yes.
Well, and it is remarkable that you have a tool at your disposal that's appropriate from your high performance athlete to your elderly grandmother who's trying to regain mobility, to someone with a degenerative disease, and then to a child. Like, you almost can't find a medication or any other modality that has that range of, that scope of ability, really. So before we get into that, why don't we talk a little bit about what KAATSU is and what KAATSU is not? Because I think that when a lot of people, anybody who might have heard about KAATSU automatically thinks, oh yeah, it's that blood flow restriction training. So, which people think of, oh, it's kind of a tourniquet type band that you would put on the upper arm or the upper leg, which restricts blood flow. And then you work through that. And then somehow this magic happens and things happen. But my sense is, and my understanding is that KAATSU is quite different from that. So maybe I'm going to let you guys decide. I'm sure you have a routine here already. You've done podcasts before. Who would like to take this one away?
I'll start and John will finish. He's a good anchorman.
Amazing.
Yeah. So KAATSU is two things. One, it's equipment, very unique equipment that actually took a long time to develop. And two, it's protocols. How do you use that equipment? And those two have to be in total sync. And the reason why, when Dr. Sato was teaching me and mentoring me, it took 13 years, because he had to show me how, for example, how do you treat a comatose patient? How do you treat someone with severe cerebral palsy? On the other hand, how do you treat a professional athlete or a young Olympian? Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, the protocols don't change. The equipment doesn't change. It's sort of a matter of pressure and a variety of other things that we'll go into. But KAATSU is, and I have on this side, I don't know if you can see it well, a standard blood pressure cuff. Yeah. And then this is the KAATSU. The KAATSU band is much, much more narrow than the blood pressure cuff. And you put that either on your upper arms or your upper legs. So you don't do both. You do upper arms or upper legs. And this band that actually took a long time to develop, it has a bladder inside, an air bladder inside. And so the air goes in and then it is deflated. So it inflates, deflates, inflates, deflates. And when it's inflated, the circumference of the band around your arm slightly, only slightly decreases. And that puts a pressure on your arm. And just as an aside, KAATSU, K-A and A-T-S-U, so the ATSU part of KAATSU means pressure in English. In Japanese, ATSU means pressure, Ka means additional pressure. And so Dr. Sato came up with this word, additional pressure, for this product that applied additional pressure on your arm. And what that does, and what it isn't, it is not the tourniquet. A tourniquet or a blood pressure cuff is specifically designed to keep blood out of the arm or the leg. It's specifically designed. It's structured differently. The materials are different. Everything about it is different, because a tourniquet or blood pressure cuff keeps blood out. The KAATSU was specifically designed to keep blood in. And only in momentarily, so a maximum of 30 seconds. And so what happens is, when you put the bands on, you feel this gentle pressure on your arm. And really, I mean gentle. It is not the blood pressure cuff. Now, when people see the bands on the arms or legs, they assume it's a blood pressure cuff, but they forget how large and the difference in size and structure between the blood pressure cuff and the KAATSU. The band was designed to slow down what we call the venous return, or the return of the blood back to the torso. And so blood is going in normally, and it's slowed down for 30 seconds coming out. What that does, it engorges the blood in your arm or your legs. And when that happens, that's what Dr. Sato figured out was a catalyst for a number of biochemical reactions in the body. And the protocols are how long do you put it on, what exercises do you, et cetera. And so maybe as an illustrative example, John, when you had any one of your surgeries and were doing the KAATSU therapy, maybe explain what those protocols are that complement this unique bit of equipment.
I have a quick question before John gets started. So the amount of pressure, it's a variable pressure.
Correct.
And does the variability of the pressure change from protocol to protocol? Like, are some protocols more high pressure than others? Or is it really just the duration under pressure instead of duration under load, let's say, if we were talking about weightlifting?
Yeah, there's a variety of changes. One, it's amount of pressure.
Okay.
Two, it's how long, we call it time under tension. How many seconds or minutes do you have that pressure? And also, what is the intensity of your exercise? Are you trying to increase your balance or your flexibility, range of motion? That's one pressure. If you're trying to increase muscle strength or muscle size, that's another pressure. But fundamentally, after these many decades of practical application, we found three fundamental ranges that fit 95% of humanity and all of their ailments. And we call those low pressure, medium pressure, high pressure. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible for the user to hit, okay, I'm at low now, or I'm at medium now, or I'm high now. And one thing that we teach are those protocols. If you have a broken arm, what do you do? If you want to increase your vertical leap, what do you do? If you had knee surgery and your gait is a little bit off, how do you return back to a smooth walking style? So those are the different protocols. It took years for Dr. Sato to download to me.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Over to you, John. Tell us about your shoulder rehab, because shoulder rehab is unpleasant at the best of times and doesn't really work that well, from what I understand.
Yeah. Well, first of all, a lot of the BFR that's out there is constant pressure.
Yeah.
And when you're, whether it's an elastic band or a very rigid band, and there's all sorts out there, but no matter what kind you use, when it's constant pressure, it is uncomfortable. It is really uncomfortable. And
I can vouch for that.
Natalie, exactly. You've done it. You know what I'm talking about. When they put these on me the first time, the very first thing I noticed was these are elastic
stretchy
bands. They move, they give. That blood pressure cuff that Stephen just had up, that thing doesn't give at all. It's very rigid, it's very wide. That's the first thing I noticed. The next thing I noticed was it only put a little bit of pressure, and then it counted down from 30 seconds. And then at the end of 30 seconds, it completely released. And you almost get this flushing sensation for about 5 seconds, new blood coming in and moving out, and then a little more pressure. So essentially 10 millimeters mercury more pressure each time. It's kind of like a step. So one set on this device, and this is the actual device. So this device, it's really small, just connects to your shorts or whatever. And then there's a couple tubes that come out and connect to the band. Very simple concept. And what the algorithms in this machine, they're just 30 seconds of pressure and then a total dump for 5. 30 seconds, a little more pressure and a dump for 5. So what that does is that perceived exertion, like oh my God, it's so hard. So yes, you get there during those 30 seconds, but then you get the release.
Yeah.
The blood comes in. And so you can keep going. When you're doing the rehab movements, it's very hard, but you're not at failure, and that's not the goal.
That's really interesting.
And And it's very different from what a lot of
Mhm.
people are selling out there at these constant pressure things. You know, bring somebody to failure, make it really uncomfortable. Does that work for muscle hypertrophy? Yes, it does, of course. I mean, you can create a lactate response and the body's going to respond in kind, and you're going to get a hormonal release. Yes. That can be done with this. There is a constant pressure option on here,
Right.
but that's not what Dr. Sato's life's work is about. It's not about making big
Same.
muscles.
But he has
It-
big muscles.
He does, but that's a natural byproduct. I mean, one of my favorite things he did with this guy that was the former cardiologist to the Emperor of Japan, Dr. Nakajima. Dr. Sato, Dr. Nakajima, and another one whose name I'm forgetting, but they went to University of Tokyo Hospital, which is kind of like the Harvard Medical School in Tokyo. And they did a 10-year-long study. And Stephen was there for this. 10 years, but here's the kicker. 10-year-long study on over 7,000 cardiac rehab patients.
Wow.
So these are not like young athletes. They're not kids. They're not tactical athletes. They're not elite athletes. They're not athletes at all. They're cardiac rehab patients. So we always like to tell people, hey, this is what they use in Japan for cardiac rehab. And this is why we want to go down that road in the US. Because can you make big muscles get hypertrophy? Yes, but that is just a small fraction of what you can do with improving vascular health and cardiac health for a huge population in this country and others.
So when you're doing cardiac rehab, so let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. So I'm guessing that it has to do with the biochemical response of the body to this variable pressure that has an effect on the function or the health of blood vessels and cardiac muscle as well.
So there is a biochemical response
or a hormone response, or
there is that. But before we go into that, and I'll let Stephen hit that, and it's very, very simple to me. If I just had a procedure, a cardiac procedure, and the doctors want to exercise my heart, not speed up the heart, but they want to exercise the perfusion of the heart, right? Cardiac output. If you have the leg bands on and they're going through very gradual cycles of pressure, you are very gradually working the heart. You're making it pump a little bit harder for 20, 30, you know, our clinical model can go up to a 60-second long pressure on, but when they initiate, they start much shorter durations. But it's just a way to subtly exercise the heart. You're not speeding it up, but you're making it work harder. So your exercise, it's great rehab for somebody that everything from a stent to open heart surgery. Is there a biochemical response? I mean, yes, absolutely, because every time you stretch open vascular tissue and you let it relax, you get that vasodilation and relaxation, your body's releasing endothelial nitric oxide. And we know that from multiple studies during that 10-year test and trial. And nitric oxide is key and essential for vascular health and elasticity through your whole body. So there's a lot of things going on there. And I think you jumped right into the more complex side of it with the biochemical piece. You know, Stephen, what are your thoughts on that? No, I think it's awesome that's right where you win.
Wait a minute. Well, because the nitric oxide is, I mean, it's so interesting, right? Because we talk about how we make less nitric oxide as we age. We talk about how some people genetically aren't as good at making nitric oxide as other people. And so now we're talking about a device or a practice or a modality, a physical modality that actually can upregulate that production of nitric oxide without taking a supplement, without using anything else. So
exactly.
All right, Stephen, over to you.
So one of the many things that Dr. Sato taught me was what a miracle our human bodies are. And KAATSU is really a catalyst for allowing the human body to do what it is intended to do. Now, of course, there are all kinds of diseases and viruses and bacteria and stuff, but the body is very, very resilient. At the end of the day, it's very, very resilient. And that's why when he was, those 13 years when he was teaching me, he was taking me to see the weakest of the weak.
Yeah.
And he was saying the fundamental, we would go to see a professional athlete in Japan, and then we'd go to someone who is very, very weak with something. And he was always impressing upon me, we're doing the same thing. It's just a matter of degree of intensity. So for example, in the heart, I mean, I was shocked when the patients, maybe they had a heart bypass, maybe they had a variety of cardiac surgeries, and they would be rolled out. And even while they were still in intensive care, they would be applying the bands to the person's arms. Generally arms, legs, it was a little more difficult just because they're in a hospital bed, et cetera. And it was very, very gentle pressure. And I think this is the big difference. I always use the word gentle, and that smile. And of course, the cardiac rehab patients were not generally not smiling.
Not smiling. No.
But the fact was, under the trained eye and hands of the cardiologist, they were there putting these bands on very, very gently. But, and John knows this very well, when you put the bands on, you get a pinkness, a beefy redness to your hands. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Sato was saying, hey, I know myself, I'm not a physician or pretend to be, but you always want to be aware of the pinkness or the redness that happens in your hand. And then he would explain to me, okay, that is the vascular tissue being engorged in blood. Then that's leading to a variety of changes, production of nitric oxide, VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, et cetera. And it was great for me as a layperson to observe things that were so simple to see with your own eyes. Of course, we're in a hospital setting. The doctors are in their whites, and all kinds of equipment is around. And we had ultrasound, we had Dopplers, we had all the equipment. But really, he was trying to teach me how to do this safely and effectively in a very, very gentle pressure, very gentle. And so, some of these people had 2 cardiac events. And so we had to be very, very gentle on them. And that extended across the spectrum of humanity. And just as another aside, dial forward to 2016. So I'd been with Dr. Sato for 15 years. I myself had a heart attack.
Oh my God.
My 17-year-old son at the time found me face down in my bathroom in the morning. He gave me CPR. I went to the hospital. I was rushed to the hospital. I have a stent in. They put me in, they call it the Arctic Sun protocol. So I was out for a while. I woke up and I had no idea what happened, what I did. And the cardiologist, Dr. Lee Carter, comes, visits me on the bedside, and he said, you had a heart attack. I said, but I'm healthy. He goes, well, you're left. And he explained. And I said, first thing I said to him was, well, can I do KAATSU?
He's like, the drugs will wear off soon. You're going to be fine.
Yeah. And he looked at me, he says, I said, oh, can I do KAATSU? That's what I do. And he said, look, you just had a heart attack. You're in the, critical care unit. We gotta get you better. I said, okay, can I do it when I get out? I was that excited to use our own equipment on my own body as I'm in the critical care unit. That's how much confidence that Dr. Sato enabled me to have, because I'd seen so many, him and Dr. Nakajima, Dr. Morita, and the other cardiologists in Japan treat so many people. Now, when obviously Dr. Sato heard of my situation, and when I did call him like 9 days later, he said, Steve, I know you're very enthusiastic, but please listen to your doctor first. and then we can talk about KAATSU, because up until that time, nobody had actually treated themselves
Right.
with KAATSU. And I went back to Dr. Carter, and he said, well, we're not going to do anything. I actually, when I went to see him for the first time, I actually took the KAATSU product with me.
Yeah.
And, in his office, I'm putting the bands on and trying to explain to him. He's staring me in complete disbelief. Now, make a long story short, when you put a stent in the artery of a human, it stays there, obviously, for the rest of your life. And eventually, generally, from what I understand, 12 to 18 months later, the vascular endothelial cells actually grow over the stent. The stent actually becomes part of your artery. And that usually takes a while. And my stent was covered like within 4 to 5 months. And
The EGF.
I wanted to prove to my own doctors, like, hey, this is really cool stuff. Not necessarily, obviously I wanted to get better, but I wanted to show that this was a way to do it. And so that was my own little self-experiment. And I say that with humility, because literally I could have killed myself, but I had so much confidence in what I had learned from Dr. Sato over a 13-year period, and Dr. Nakajima, Dr. Morita, et cetera, that I was confident in myself. My wife did not want me to put these bands on my arms, did not. So I waited until she was out of the house, and I went and I put the bands on myself, again, doing it very, very gently. I'd never been in the hospital, really, and all of a sudden I was in critical care unit, intensive care unit. So I was obviously very nervous, but I put them on, and I'm well. Now that's to say, anybody who wants to do KAATSU had a cardiac event, 100% please talk to your cardiologist first, and you're free to talk to me too.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. So when your cardiologists and the doctors that were treating you saw the effect, and you clearly have at this point a massive amount of literature and clinical evidence from the study in Japan that shows that this can be an effective way to help people to heal. Were they open to that at all, or are they still doing the things that they do now? I'm just curious.
They were open for KAATSU for me,
not for their patients.
They had seen me, and I shared the information with them. But like anything, the information in your own country, doctors in their own country believe the doctors in their own country. So even though it had been proven in Japan, we still have to conduct the same trials and experiments, and go through the government regulations, et cetera, to do the same in the United States. But from my perspective, that Japanese individual and myself, we're humans, and we went through the same sort of thing. I just had that much confidence in the product and in the protocol that I was willing to do it on myself. And
that's impressive.
Yeah.
I actually have a friend who, as we speak right now, is having a stent put in.
Okay.
Like right now, like at this very minute.
Got it.
Oh, wow.
So in terms of people in North America, let's say someone who's listening to this, and let's say they've recently had one of these procedures, is there any context in which they'd be able to access KAATSU, or would you recommend to them, look, give it a couple of months and then, because nobody's going to be able to advise, like, we're in a world where we have to be super careful about giving direction or advice or whatever it may be to anyone who's in any kind of any situation really, but in a situation like this, nobody's going to sit there and go, oh, guess what? In the next couple of months, you'll be able to do this, and here's what's going to happen. How would someone in North America who's had a cardiac event avail themselves of any kind of the knowledge or of the technology of KAATSU without either putting themselves or their practitioners at risk.
Yeah. So what we typically do, and we get a lot of those inquiries by telephone, by email, etc. And always that 10-year study, we have a compendium of all the literature that came out of the University of Tokyo Hospital, and I send it to them. And I highlight the different studies that are relevant to their situation. And I say, please read it for yourself, share it, and I send it by digital file. Share it with your cardiologist, your internist, whoever you're consulting with. If they have any questions, they can call me, or they can call the physicians that are associated with us and work for us. So that's usually how they go. I mean, I've had some people go, hey, this sounds a little too risky. Fine, I totally understand. Just get better. The doctor kept you alive, so trust him 100%.
Absolutely.
We're just saying there is an alternative. If you and your physician and your family and others are open to it, please do it. Now, they've had some people, they say, I have this, and this. I said, well, that's not here's the information. The physician goes, I don't know about this, maybe not. The person still comes back to us.
Yeah.
And they're a little bit, not desperate, I would say, they're a little bit hopeful. And in those cases, I have to say, forget business. I look at, follow your doctor 100% of the time. I don't know you, your doctor knows you, and just do it. If he or she are interested in more, we can provide them more information, and that's how we go. So I don't know, it's probably very few of the people go to the next step. Even a smaller number of physicians go say, hey, let's do this. But there are some that go, okay, like my own cardiologist, because he sees me and he does all this tests. And after I think it was about 6 to 7 months later, I was so curious as to what happened to my body that I made a very specific trip to the Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School. They ran a full battery of tests on me. I did the same thing at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, did a full battery on me. I went up to Stanford Medical School, spoke with those people, and I wanted to show them what I had experienced and why I thought I had made this, in my mind, remarkable recovery. And they didn't disagree. They just didn't agree to do it. And that's okay. I understand there's an element of caution. And that's perfectly fine. I just wanted to show that we have so much confidence, John, with his 12 surgeries and myself with my own issue, that we have ourselves as husbands, fathers, neighbors. We have the ultimate confidence in our own product because we apply them to our own selves. We're not out there, trying to sell just to get revenue. We live and breathe KAATSU on a daily basis with ourselves and our family.
Amazing. I have a question for you though. So the KAATSU you had been training with KAATSU. So the KAATSU training is not going to prevent it's not going to prevent a cardiac event, which I find interesting, right? Because you almost would expect that as a KAATSU practitioner yourself, there would have been some protective, well, I don't know if you would expect it, just from what I've heard so far. You might imagine that there'd be some protective element in terms of the vasculature, but obviously there's, nature or whatever your life circumstances are can still overcome whatever the benefits are of the KAATSU.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, David, could I jump in real quick? Yeah, Natalie, his event was a widowmaker. He should not have survived that event. So you can make the argument, I guess, that because of the incredible vascular elasticity Stephen did have in place, that he was able to survive that.
Gotcha.
Is that off base, Steve? I know Rieko doesn't like when we talk about that.
Oh, it's okay. That's my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, so it's absolutely true. I
Mhm.
was shocked myself. At that point, I had done 15 plus years of KAATSU.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm fairly active, and that's why when I woke up from the induced coma, I was just shocked.
Yeah.
It just blew me away. How could that happen? Now, the circumstances of which it happened, I later learned were very problematic. So at that time, we were trying to develop a new product, new KAATSU product, that actually this C3, and I had traveled back and forth to Tokyo 3 times in 11 days, traveling business class.
Holy jumping.
So and toward the end, and I was barely sleeping. Now, John is, as a Navy SEAL, he's gone through 6 days of non-sleep and intense training. I'm a civilian.
Yeah.
I did 11 days of very, very minimal sleep.
And high
And I
altitude
just think,
flying around. Yeah.
yeah, and I just think that the time changes and that 11-day period, when I came back on that third trip, I was coming off of the airplane at LAX, my whole world I lost all peripheral vision.
Wow.
And my wife picked me up at the airport. We had some dinner. I went home, and it was the next day, which I fell. So I'm pretty confident that if I had just lived a regular life and not had that 11-day period,
Mhm.
probably would not have happened. But the fact that it did happen, I am 100% confident that 15 years of KAATSU in some way, minor or major, I don't know, and nobody will ever know, helped me survive.
For sure. For sure. Okay, that's amazing. Okay, well, we could keep talking about this for a long time, but I know we've got limited time. So I want to talk about a couple of other applications, because I want to move into a little bit more of the hypertrophy performance. And I know, like in the form that you sent me, you said, like, let's talk about women over the age of 40, and let's talk about skin, and let's talk about longevity. Let's talk about building lean muscle. Cause I'm past the over 40. I'm like over 55, let's say. And, so I sit there and go, I've never been an easy gainer at the best of times. Like I've never been a person who's overly muscular, but with every passing, and I'm not even to say decade, I'd say every passing 5 years, it gets harder and harder to maintain and put on lean mass. And so I just want to talk a little bit about KAATSU now, the other side of the coin, move into this, either the longevity space and or the performance space. And even another question I had, and then I'm going to let you guys go talk, is so there's muscle, and can it help at all with bone density? Because I've read some stuff that talks about how increasing growth hormone. And if we increase growth hormone, then there's going to be some anabolic benefits to skeletal tissue as well, which would be bones. And we've got a lot of people, I'm into this whole world of peptides and stuff like that. And people are using not necessarily synthetic growth hormone, but they use growth hormone secretagogues. So peptides that will stimulate the body's production of growth hormone. But ever since I've been exposed to KAATSU, I've been wanting to ask the question, like, can we, just like we can see that KAATSU can improve nitric oxide production, what role does it play in that world? Because if it's helping skin, it's got to be helping growth hormone too. So there's about 27 questions buried in there. I'm going to let you guys go to it. You don't have to answer all of them, but
I'll address the lean muscle mass, especially for women over the age of 40, 50, 60. It doesn't matter. As we age, it gets increasingly difficult for most people to want to go to the gym and lift weights. It's just not something most adults want to do. There are that small handful, but most of them do. The beauty of KAATSU, and we see this time and time again with women who their children in their 40s and 50s, their children are going through high school, heading off to college, or in their 60s and 70s, they're now seeing their grandchildren, etc. We've seen these women, and we teach them, and this is the important part of protocol, and this is what we learned from Dr. Sato. You can put these bands on any time of the day. So if you're folding clothes, you're washing dishes, you're sweeping, you're washing your car window, anything, you're reading a book,
You're working at your computer.
you're working at your computer, put the bands on. And that slight movement, even tapping, the keyboard, that slight movement with the bands on, you feel like you've done a workout. Not necessarily bicep curls, but that overall feeling that I just exerted myself, not to the point of exertion, not to the point of fatigue, but that just overall, gosh, I just, I feel good.
Yeah, I did. Like, you get that endorphin release, you get the.
Yes. And if you do that once a day over a period of time, and we recommend people do this, when you first get KAATSU, take a picture of yourself or measure yourself, however way you want to do it. Don't send it to anybody, keep it 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, do the same thing and do a before and after. We're not for testimonials, not for marketing, just your own self, because it's so gradual. And that picture that John showed of Dr. Sato, he's got huge muscles. Everybody assumes he's in the weight room, just lifting heavy weight. What Dr. Sato actually does, when I was those 13 years with him, we would do KAATSU in the morning, we would do KAATSU in the afternoon, and he would do KAATSU at night. Our morning and afternoon sessions, we would sit in his office and we would have the bands on as we're sitting and talking. And of course, myself, I talk with my hands. Dr. Sato was demonstrating different techniques. And so we were doing slight movement, just gentle movement, just opening and closing our hands. You don't need to do the heavy weights. And so for that 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old individual, you can literally, in the course of your own lifestyle, at home, in the office, taking care of your grandchildren, fixing a lunch for your high school kid, whatever it is, put the bands on, and that is your workout. You're not sweating. You don't have to reapply your makeup. And this leads to a variety of things. And we learned with some very sophisticated tests that plasmalogens, ceramides, and a variety of other metabolites are coming as a result of this. And when we first did it, so basically we took a vial of blood, did what we call gentle KAATSU. So, some kind of movement. And movement could be, if you have carpal tunnel syndrome, just moving your hand, in a circular manner, or opening and closing your hands. And then 20 minutes later, we take a vial of blood and we would compare those two of the same individual. And the researchers were shocked. The density and the amount of different metabolites that were produced in the post blood analysis.
Stem cells? Did they look at stem cells?
John, you can handle that question because it's over in Florida when they're doing this.
John, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm moving
No
things
worries.
around. I didn't want to be disruptive to Stephen. Dr. Adam Ans, he works at the Andrews Research Institute. He uses KAATSU to help before you harvest the stem cells, before you take the blood. He'll have guys do bouts of KAATSU cycles, which is doing some very simple multi-joint movements, or maybe just standing, doing quarter squats, exercising, but very, very simple exercise with KAATSU. And he's done tests and studies there at Andrews, looking at baseline stem cell concentration with no KAATSU, with doing traditional exercise, and with doing KAATSU cycles. And what he's found is he can have the stem cell concentration significantly elevated with somebody that does intense traditional exercise, like 8-count bodybuilders or something.
Yep.
Or you can put KAATSU on that patient in the comfort of the waiting room and have them just do some simple movements with their arms or legs and get a very similar, if not better in some cases, response.
Wow.
So there is a really cool study, is a Chinese study done with KAATSU on stem cell proliferation, how it increases when you're doing KAATSU, and we can send that to you. So there is something happening on the stem cell side. And when you're talking about connective tissue or bone cells, osteoblasts, osteoclasts, all those types of things with bone density and bone health.
Yeah.
We have some studies showing that as well. And everything in the body has blood flow, right? I mean, granted, ligaments and tendons have less blood flow, but there's capillaries everywhere. So if you think about just physically what's happening during a KAATSU cycle, during the pressure phase, all the way down to the smallest vascular cells, all the way down to the capillaries, really, you're creating an engorgement, or you're stretching this tissue open and holding it for 30 seconds. Well, the other thing that's happening during that engorgement phase is you now have fresh blood with a higher partial pressure of O2 around whatever cells are being affected. And the body seems to push that stuff wherever it's most needed. So if you have a shin splint happening and you're wearing the leg bands, doing that every cycle, you're increasing oxygenated blood around the injury, the wound, or what have you. Does that systemically help with osteoarthritis and bone density through your whole body? Yes, of course, because it's a systemic response. I mean, you feel the result distal of the bands, like you'll feel that lactate or that burn in your muscles, but whatever hormonal response is happening, it's going everywhere.
Yeah.
That's why when we have them test retina blood flow or forehead blood flow or blood-brain barrier blood flow, we see that perfusion going up through the whole body, even though you just have the leg bands on or just have the arm bands on. So there's a lot of pretty amazing things happening. One of the things we're looking to do with Air Force Special Operations right now is, because they have a lot of problems with stress fractures, with guys going through their assessment and selection training. We see the same thing in naval special warfare. We see the same thing really everywhere in the military, especially nowadays. Most people, let's just say, are maybe not as physically capable as they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. We see lots of musculoskeletal injuries and a lot of shin splints. So there's a lot of interest on that side as well.
Yeah, no kidding. So on the hormone side, so growth hormone and also testosterone, do those hormones specifically get affected as well? I mean, I think I kind of know the answer, but I want to hear it from you guys.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the things we notice, and I'm a guy that's had a lot of blast injury, a lot of TBI, I've dealt with some PTSD, I've had a lot of issues with sleep. One of the first things that tanks, goes in the hole immediately when you're not in stage 3, stage 4 sleep, is testosterone. So when I was still active duty, I got my testosterone tested, and the guy's like, "Hey, how are you sleeping?" And I'm like, "Well, 3 hours, 5 hours, this, that, And he's like, you have the testosterone level of a 14-year-old girl." I'm like, "What?"
But every guy wants to hear, right?
I'm a Navy SEAL, man. I can't have that kind of test. And I had the test done twice, and it's sleep. It was because of sleep. Once the sleep gets better, all the T levels improve, and I didn't need any testosterone supplement. I just need to start sleeping better. Well, the longer I was with this company, the more I started to learn about Dr. Sato actually developed an insomnia protocol. And when let me back up for a second. When the Japanese government before the Tokyo Games, the Summer Games, when they told the International Olympic Committee that the athletes could no longer show up 5 weeks before an event, that for this Olympics, for that Summer Games with COVID, the athletes could not show up until 5 days before an event.
Which is catastrophic.
Yeah, the trainers and the coaches were losing their minds. They're like, oh, wait a minute, we have all kinds of circadian rhythm issues. We have to let our athletes acclimate to new time zones, new weather, the heat, all this stuff. Well, it just so happens that we already were working with some of the IOC researchers in the UK at University of Brighton. They were looking at KAATSU as a recovery tool. When that announcement came out, they said, well, wait a minute, we're seeing a lot of benefits with these clients and patients and athletes getting into that parasympathetic state faster, getting into stage 3, 4 recovery sleep faster. There's probably something going on with the autonomic nervous system that might be helping guys with sleep. And they actually just, the IOC guys just recently put out a official medical journal article inviting much more study on this, because anecdotally, what they were seeing almost across the board was when an athlete did KAATSU cycles before going to sleep, they slept better. They got into that parasympathetic state faster. Well, for me personally, when I started doing a lot of KAATSU, I knew I was sleeping better. And then I started wearing a lot of trackers, Oura rings, Whoop bands, all this kind of stuff. And it was true. My sleep was improving. And, there were a lot of sleep hygiene things I was doing, but I wasn't doing anything with meds. The only real big change was a little bit of diet and a ton of KAATSU, and my sleep got so much better. And with the sleep, back to your original question, testosterone, absolutely. I'm back up to normal where I should be.
Okay, so it's the sleep really that restored the testosterone, not the effect of the KAATSU itself that stimulates testosterone at the muscle.
I think it's both. I think it's both, because we have studies showing HGH levels going up significantly, and testosterone usually mirrors that as well.
Okay.
Regardless of the sleep. That was just my personal story.
Yeah, that was your personal story. So how many? Okay, so if, let's say, I were to start using KAATSU bands while I'm working, wouldn't I? But I'm not. I actually want really great results. Like, I want really good results. So then would it not benefit me to also do a workout a day, or would it be every other day, or you're shaking your head a little bit? Like, are you actually, because I like working out. I don't have time to go to the gym necessarily. I mean, I do my 30-minute kickboxing workout HIIT thing that I really like, but other than that, but I actually do enjoy working out. So would there not be, are there not degrees of benefits to the different types of things you can do? Like, I mean, you make a great point that you can wear your KAATSU doing day-to-day things and get benefit from that. But would you not get better benefits also if you did a workout as well?
So in your case, where you do enjoy your kick workout, Dr. Sato taught me, if someone enjoys doing something, have them continue to do that. Now, I would say once a day, you put the bands on your arms, once a day on your legs. You will see in a short period of time, your kickboxing performance increase. Now, if you really want to see a huge increase, you actually then put the bands on for about 10 minutes during your kickboxing workout. So we call that performance training.
Okay.
So, and that holds true for if you're a track athlete and you want to increase your start, if you're a swimmer and you want to increase your strength, if you're a basketball player and want to increase your vertical leap, in these cases, put the bands on as you're going through that specific movement that's used in your sport. It could be a boxer punching. It could be a wrestler doing a different move. It could be a pianist just getting ready. So it doesn't, you don't have to be an athlete. You could be a carpenter that has some kind of tendonitis. We want you, if this hurts, we want the bands on, and we want to get that, hammering the nail down so it doesn't hurt anymore. A pianist, if there's a difficult movement that they need to do, well, put the bands on as you're doing the movement. The first time you'll not be able to do it, just like anything.
Right.
Over time, just like kickboxing, if you want to see, the angle of your legs get up higher, or your reaction time being better, then we would teach you, these are part of the protocols that we would teach you how to do KAATSU before the workout, during the workout, and after the workout. And I would say easily within 3 weeks, you will see a remarkable improvement. And
interesting.
You can videotape it and you can see your leg come up higher, or, a faster movement. And you'll be less out of breath. Now, with KAATSU and the performance training, you will be out of breath.
Oh, you'll be sucking wind for sure.
It will be taxing.
Yeah.
But in the course of your body adapting to this stress, it will be able to perform better, without a doubt.
Right. And so how do you use it in the water for swimmers? Does that little device go into the water too?
No, these bands are made.
No,
of
not the
neoprene.
bands, the little gizmo.
No, we don't put the device itself is not waterproof.
Okay.
It's water resistant, but not waterproof. So in that case, we don't use the KAATSU cycle mode. We use the KAATSU constant mode. So we use the neoprene bands. So these are waterproof. We inflate them, and then you can go in the water. And that they use that for people who do aquatherapy, people who have lower extremity issues, and put the bands on, inflate them, go in the water, do your aquatherapy or aquarobics, and then come out.
And for a swimmer, they would do maybe a couple of lengths or a shorter workout with the bands and then take them off, depending on
elite swimmers. You can, yes, you can do that.
Sorry.
Yes, so what you can do is, if let's say an elite Olympic swimmer, if they're going to swim 2 hours, they could get more bang for their buck out of those 2 hours. Now they can swim for an hour and a half, but they can actually do more within the 2 hours with the KAATSU. So for example, they can work on their start, they can work on their turns, they can work on their technique with the bands in the water.
Okay. Amazing. Well, I probably have 3 more pages of questions. So I think that
we got to do another one.
We're going to have to do another one. And you know what, maybe what we'll do is, because I've got a pretty large Facebook group, so they'll listen to this. There's about 10,000 of them, and we'll invite questions, and then we'll do a follow-up with some Q&A in there maybe. But is there anything else that you'd like to squeeze into this particular episode that we haven't touched on?
Well, you mentioned briefly skin. And if you think about all of the tiny capillaries.
I was going to say blood flow. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, it's not going to take the wrinkles away. It's absolutely not. But it's going to enable the elasticity of the skin to at least maintain itself. And you and I know, if the worst thing we're doing is maintaining as we're going older and older, yes.
Rock on. Just stop the madness now.
Yeah.
John, you look like you were going to say something. Anything you think we should touch on?
Well, it's a whole nother podcast probably, but I can't end one without saying what we're seeing with the wounded warrior population. Anybody dealing with neuropathic pain, I would say 90% of those guys see a significant level of relief with this. It's very personal to me, because that's the world I came from. I was at Walter Reed about 3 months ago and met this guy, Justin. He was 4 months out from a amputation of his arm above the elbow, and the neuropathic pain on this poor kid was just crushing him, even with the meds. And after his first 2 KAATSU cycles, I mean, just tears. He's like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. So there's a whole nother conversation to be had with how this can help with spinal cord injuries, or think of a diabetic with lower extremity wound care, and they can't get these wounds to heal, or neuropathic pain, chronic arthritic pain. There's so much goodness that's happening with this stuff. And it's not constant pressure, high intensity, lactic acid burn. That's not where the relief comes from. It comes from this very, very gradual cycling of pressure on, pressure off, new blood comes in, pressure on. And there's something going on with that whole, and maybe it's a neuroplasticity aspect, with how pain signals kind of get stuck.
Yeah.
And you can kind of break through that. But I love what we're seeing with the wounded, ill, and injured veteran population. Very, very promising.
That's amazing. And, it's interesting that, the word cycling just keeps coming up over and over again. And one thing we know, anything that we do in the human body, the body responds better to cycles and pulses than it does to a constant input, right? I mean, even when it comes to diet or anything at all, it's the push and pull that you're going to get better results from than this just having your foot on the gas all the time. And so it's interesting how even in this application, that theme just keeps coming up. And, it makes so much sense, because you cut off the blood. I mean, you restrict the blood flow, or you slow it down, whatever the case may be. What's interesting about KAATSU is you're replenishing the blood with the nutrients over and over again, as opposed to the constant occlusion that happens with the other bands, where you're kind of stuck with what you've got where it is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there'd be a
You
depletion.
get all that waste in there.
Yeah. So there'd be a depletion. You'd get the waste products, and you don't have the opportunity to flush it out. And so it just makes a whole lot of sense. And I would think that the smiles come from, this kind of flushing of, like, it's probably even like a physical feeling that you get from this flushing of nutrients and toxins at the same time. I'm guessing.
Yeah, Natalie, we have to get you one of these, and get you some training, and you'll fall in love with it. You'll do emails with it in the morning, and stay on the desk with the leg bands on. You'll just, it's addicting.
Yeah. No, I'm all right. I'm sitting here going, I need one. I need to get one for my parents. Going through that. I have a client with insomnia who has restless leg syndrome. We haven't even talked about that, but I'm gonna take a leap and think that there's a slim chance that might be helpful for him. So we can talk about that in episode 2.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate your time and your presence. And why don't we tell people how they can find out more about either to reach out to you or KAATSU? And you also gave us a lovely discount code at the beginning. So why don't I let you guys handle that piece now?
Yeah. So you can reach us at KAATSU, www.KAA, so double A, KAATSU.com. If you want to send an email, info@kaatsu.com. We have a Nat 10 discount. So, send us as many questions as you want. I don't know our 800 number off the top of my head, but it's on the website. So call, text, email. We're here to answer your questions.
Love it. Thank you.
Nat 10.
Keep it simple. No H's.
That's right. 10% discount.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet you both.
Thank you very much, Adel.